Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are taking the ultimate shortcut through, well, one of the most frustrating and honestly enduring cold cases in modern American history, the vanishing of Iowa news anchor Jodi Huisentruit. We're dealing with a really chilling scenario here. Think about it. It's the pre-dawn hours, Tuesday, June 27, 1995. Jodi Huisentruit, born June 5, 1968. She's just 27 years old. Ambitious, successful, the morning anchor for CBS affiliate Kim M in Mason City, Iowa. She's supposed to host the morning show, Daybreak, standard routine, but she never shows up. And what police eventually find at her apartment complex points to a sudden violent struggle. Yet the person responsible and Jodi herself, they just vanished. No definitive trace left behind. So our mission today is to take this really comprehensive timeline, all the specific investigative details from the sources we've gathered, and just unpack this mystery piece by painful piece. We want to give you, the listener, the full picture of what happened that morning, and maybe even more crucially, the decades, literally decades, of frustrating investigation, intense media scrutiny, and legal limbo that followed.
And that limbo, that prolonged frustration, that's really what defines this case, isn't it? It's not like there was zero evidence. Quite the opposite, actually. The scene itself had specific, compelling clues. The abduction was clearly sudden, clearly violent. It pushed investigators into high gear immediately. But as we trace this history, you see this pattern emerge. The specific clues just never added up. They never led to that one conclusive piece needed for an arrest. So despite this enormous effort, decades long, from police, from PIs, from the public, no definitive clues were ever found. Nothing that pointed straight at a perpetrator. The trail just went cold. And that lack of resolution eventually forced a legal one.
Right.
Jodi was declared legally dead in May 2001. It's a case defined by these tantalizing specifics.
Yeah.
And then this total failure to connect the dots. Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with who Jodi was. Because understanding her personality, her drive, it's kind of key to understanding why her disappearance was taken so seriously, right from the get-go, by her colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely. She wasn't just, a face on local TV. She was really a classic example of that Midwestern ambition and drive. She grew up in Long Prairie, Minnesota, and she showed that ambition early on, especially in sports. She was a really good golfer, apparently, seriously good.
Oh, yeah?
She helped her high school team win the state Class A tournament, not once, but twice, back-to-back, 85 and 86. That tells you something about her competitive spirit, her discipline.
And that discipline, you can see it translating directly into her studies and her career path. She went to St. Cloud State University, graduated in 1990, bachelor's degree in mass communications and speech communication.
Yeah.
Solid foundation.
And, while broadcasting was clearly the end goal, she took a slightly unusual detour at first.
Right. I found that interesting, too. Before the anchor desk, she was actually working in the air. She started as a flight attendant for Northwest Airlines.
Yeah, a brief stint.
But it didn't last long. She pretty quickly pivoted back to broadcasting, got her foot in the door at KGAN, the CBS affiliate in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. She was their Iowa City bureau chief there. So she was definitely on the move, career-wise. Climbed the ladder pretty fast. She moved back up to Minnesota for a bit, reporting job at KSAX in Alexandria. That's an ABC affiliate. And then she landed what was seen as a pretty significant step up, the morning anchor job at Kim MT in Mason City. And Mason City is important because Kim MT covers a pretty big area, right? Including parts of southeast Minnesota. So she had a wide viewership, was really building her professional profile. By all accounts, she was established, organized, very reliable, dependable.
Which makes what happened next even more jarring. Let's get into the crucial 24 hours leading right up to her disappearance, because this wasn't just some random event midweek. There's a very specific chain of events just before June 27th, 1995.
Indeed. Monday, June 26th. It was a pretty normal day for her, seems like. Worked, then she capped it off with a social event she played in a golf tournament. But the critical part here, and something the investigation focused heavily on later, was what she did that evening. She went over to the house of a Mason City resident named John Van Cy.
Okay, Van Cys. That name comes up a lot.
It does. Yeah. The reason for the visit was specific, according to the reports. She went there to watch a homemade video, a tape he'd made of a birthday party he threw for her earlier that month.
Okay.
So this interaction, this visit, provides a direct link to an individual who, becomes pretty central to the timeline discussions later on.
So she is at Van Cys's house the night before. Then we jump ahead just a few hours to the pre-dawn hours of Tuesday, June 27th. She's scheduled to be at the station early, right?
Right.
To prep for daybreak.
Right. And this is where the timeline gets forensic.
Yeah.
Minute by minute almost. At 4:10 a.m. Tuesday morning, the KMT producer, Amy Kunz, calls Jodi. Why? Because Jodi hadn't shown up for work yet. And like we said, Jodi was reliable. This was immediately out of character.
Okay, so Kunz calls her at 4 p.m. and Jodi.
Jodi answers the phone, which
Yeah.
is huge. She admits she overslept. And crucially, she tells Kunz she's getting ready right then and heading straight to the station.
Wow. Okay, so that 4:10 a.m. call. That's like the absolute last confirmed contact, isn't it? The last time anyone can definitively say, yes, she was alive, she was conscious, she was in her apartment.
Precisely, is the line in the sand.
But if she was alive and answering the phone at 4:10 a.m., saying she was leaving, what happened with the follow-up? Why the delay in raising the alarm?
That delay, that roughly 3-hour gap between her saying, I'm leaving now, and the police actually being called, that's arguably one of the biggest frustrations in the early moments of this case. Think about it. The real alarm bells didn't seem to ring until 6 a.m. That's when Jodi still hadn't arrived, and Amy Kunz had to step in and anchor the morning show herself.
Oh, so nearly 2 hours passed just then.
Right. And even then, the police weren't called immediately. It took until 7:13 a.m. for the Kim&T staff to finally contact the Mason City Police Department.
7:13. So from 4:10 to 7:37 to 3. That's over 3 hours.
Exactly. And if you analyze that window, that 3-hour potential window of opportunity for whoever abducted her, it's terrifyingly large. She vanished sometime between roughly 4:15 a.m., when she had been walking out her door, and 7:13 a.m. when the police were finally dispatched. That lack of immediate notification, I mean, it effectively gave the perpetrator a 3-hour head start before any official search, any BOLO, any investigation could even begin. In an abduction, those minutes, those first hours, they are absolutely golden, and they were lost.
And when the police finally did get to her apartment complex, the scene they found confirmed the worst fears, right? That a violent confrontation had happened right there. Okay, so this is where the forensic details start piling up, and they become just agonizingly specific, yet somehow inconclusive. So police find her car. It's a red Mazda Miata, the one she was apparently planning on buying, interestingly, just sitting there in the parking lot.
All right.
But right next to the car, clear signs of a struggle.
Yeah.
Physical evidence. This wasn't someone just deciding not to go to work. This was violent.
Yeah, the physical evidence really paints a picture of a sudden, desperate fight. Her personal items were scattered around on the pavement near the car.
Yeah.
Most notably, investigators found her red high heels just left there, which suggests, maybe she was rushing, maybe she pulled off her feet. And then there was the car key. It was bent, like significantly bent, as if someone had violently twisted it, maybe trying to jam it into the lock or the ignition during the struggle, or maybe it broke off in the lock. Either way, it implies force.
A bent key, wow.
But probably the most persistent and frankly most frustrating piece of forensic evidence found right there at the scene was an unidentified palm print. It was lifted off a nearby pole.
Okay, a palm print. Now, you hear that and you think, great evidence, but unidentified for decades. How does that even happen in this day and age with modern databases?
It's a huge roadblock, exactly. The sources don't specify the exact quality of the print, like if it was a perfect full print or just a partial. But the fact that it's remained unidentified for so long strongly suggests one of two things, really. Either, one, it was a partial or smudged print, maybe didn't have enough unique ridge detail for a conclusive match in the databases, especially the ones available back in '95. Or two, the person who left that print has simply never had their prints taken, never been arrested, never processed through the system in a way that would put their palm print on file.
So it could be a perfectly good print, but from someone totally outside the system?
Potentially.
Yeah, okay.
So if we try to connect this to the bigger picture, the crime scene, right? The scattered items, the shoes, the bent key, this mysterious palm print, it all points towards a sudden, brutal attack. It looks like she was ambushed right as she was trying to get into her car to go to work. It doesn't really feel like a robbery gone wrong. Yeah. It has the hallmarks of something targeted, maybe even planned. A calculated abduction, even if the violence itself was maybe more spontaneous during the struggle.
And this physical evidence isn't in isolation. There were witness accounts too, right? People heard things.
Yes, absolutely. Investigators talked to at least 3 neighbors in the apartment complex, and they reported hearing screams, specifically around the time Jodi would likely have been leaving for work, so sometime shortly after that 4:10 a.m. phone call.
Screams. That really solidifies the timeline and the violent nature of it all.
It does. It pins the event to that very narrow window after the call.
And those red high heels found on the ground, it just paints such a vivid, awful picture. Someone literally yanked out of their morning routine, unable to even finish getting ready for work, just gone.
And adding another layer to this, we have a specific vehicle description, potentially tied to that exact time and place. A neighbor, someone nearby, reported seeing a very distinct vehicle, a white Ford Econoline van.
A white van. Okay, that sounds promising.
Well, yes and no. The neighbor reported seeing it idling in the parking lot right around the same time the screams were heard. So it's an immediate, potentially actionable lead. But it's also incredibly challenging.
Why challenging?
Think about 1995, a white Ford Econoline van. How many of those were on the road in the Midwest back then?
Ah, right. Thousands probably.
Exactly. It's a super common work vehicle. Tradesmen, delivery companies, small businesses, they all use them. So while the sighting strongly suggests a possible getaway vehicle, maybe someone waiting for her, investigators were suddenly faced with this monumental task, trying to track down potentially hundreds, if not thousands, of similar-looking vans across multiple states.
It's the definition of a specific clue that's also incredibly anonymous.
Precisely. It hints at planning someone was likely waiting, but the clue itself, the van, didn't point to who was waiting. The pieces just didn't connect.
So that initial failure to link the physical evidence, the screams, the van sighting, to link any of it to a solid suspect, that must have kicked off a massive investigation right away.
Oh, absolutely.
But you often see this in tough cases, right? When local law enforcement hits a wall fairly quickly, the family often steps up and takes the lead in pushing things forward.
They did. The early efforts to find Jodi were huge, and they drew national attention almost immediately. By September 1995, just a couple of months after she disappeared, the Huisentruit family hired private investigators. They brought in McCarthy and Associates, who then engaged an Omaha-based PI named Doug Jassa. And Jassa was apparently really instrumental in getting the case national exposure very quickly.
How so?
He helped bring the case to big national true crime shows. We're talking America's Most Wanted Unsolved Mysteries. Getting on those platforms back then was critical.
Yeah, that's huge reach.
Absolutely. It did a few things. One, it put immense public pressure on the Mason City Police and other law enforcement. Two, it generated potentially hundreds of tips, maybe from people who wouldn't have called the local police directly. And three, it definitely put the perpetrator, whoever they were, on notice. These shows basically made Jodi's disappearance a household tragedy across the country.
But the search for answers didn't stop with just traditional PI work and TV shows, did it? The family explored some less conventional avenues, too.
That's right. And it really highlights the sheer desperation they must have felt. In November 1995, so just 5 months into this nightmare, the PSIs and some members of the Huisentruit family actually traveled all the way out to Los Angeles. Why? To meet with 3 prominent psychics.
Wow. Psychics.
They,
That's quite a step. And you mentioned this wasn't exactly kept under wraps.
No, not at all. The sources confirmed that meeting was actually filmed and televised. It ended up being the pilot episode for the show, Psychic Detectives.
No kidding, the pilot. So what was the actual impact of bringing psychics into such a high-profile investigation like this? Did it help?
Well, the main impact, realistically, from an investigative perspective, it's usually about generating more media coverage, keeping the story alive, and maybe, for the family, it provides a sense of taking action, exploring every possible lead, no matter how unconventional. But the sources are pretty clear on the outcome. While these psychic consultations generated publicity, maybe some vague new leads, they never resulted in any concrete, actionable evidence. Nothing that led police to Jodi or to a suspect.
Okay, so back to the more conventional methods. There were ground searches too, right?
Oh, yeah. Big ones. In May 1996, so almost a year after she vanished, about 100 volunteers came together for a massive ground search. They covered parts of Cerro Gordo County, meticulously marking any spots that looked suspicious with flags. Law enforcement then went back and carefully checked every single one of those flagged locations.
And the result?
The same result. Agonizingly, no promising evidence was found. Nothing significant turned up.
It's just incredible when you think about the sheer scale of the police work involved. The sources say police and PIs conducted well over 1,000 interviews in connection with this case.
1,000 interviews. Think about that manpower.
1,000 interviews, national TV exposure, volunteer searches, psychics, specific forensic clues like the key and the print. And still, the sources confirm absolutely no conclusive evidence ever surfaced. Nothing to identify or charge a suspect. The case just went colder and colder to the point where 5 years after she disappeared, a really difficult legal decision had to be made.
Right. That legal status change in May 2001, when Jodi Huisentruit was legally declared dead, that carries a lot of weight, legally and emotionally.
How does that declaration actually change things? Does the investigation just stop?
No, it doesn't mean the investigation stops entirely, but it does fundamentally shift the perspective and the process. Primarily, it shifts the official classification from a missing person case, which often implies hope of finding them alive, to effectively a homicide investigation, even without a body. This can sometimes reallocate resources or change investigative priorities, and maybe most importantly for the family, it allows them to finally settle legal matters. Things like her estate, insurance, that sort of thing. It provides a form of painful legal closure, even when the emotional closure of knowing what happened is still missing. The legal system basically has to acknowledge the reality of her permanent absence.
Gotcha. But even with that legal declaration, the public search for answers, the push for information, it didn't stop there. People kept trying to keep the case alive, right? Especially moving into the digital age.
Absolutely. The public, and particularly some journalists, refused to let the case just fade away. In 2003, two Minnesota television journalists, Josh Benson and Gary Peterson, saw the need for a central online hub for information, so they created findjodi.com. And that website became, and still is, really vital. It acts as a clearinghouse for tips, case updates, photos, timelines, everything related to the case. It helps keep Jodi's story in the public eye.
That kind of citizen-led effort using the internet seems critical for these long-term cold cases, doesn't it? Especially when official updates from the police might slow down over the years.
It's incredibly important. It maintains momentum, allows new generations to learn about the case, and provides a direct channel for potential tips. And the mainstream media, too, has been remarkably consistent in revisiting this. The case keeps popping back into the spotlight, which prevents it from being totally forgotten. Like the 10th anniversary in 2005 got major coverage, including, as you mentioned, a deep dive by 2020. And then much more recently in 2022, 2020 aired another special, Gone at Dawn. That was actually the third time that specific show had featured Jodi's case.
3 times on 2020 alone.
Yeah. That consistent media engagement really underscores how deeply this case has resonated and the public's ongoing desire for answers for resolution.
Okay, so as we move deeper into the 21st century, the story starts to shift a bit. It moves away from just the initial scene and the early investigation, and we start seeing these strange long-term tensions bubbling up. Things that seem to point towards potential issues within the investigation itself, maybe even political stuff or internal problems. And this is where it gets really bizarre, particularly concerning the handling of evidence. One of the most shocking developments has to be the journal leak in 2008.
Oh, absolutely. That was stunning.
So get this, photocopies, 84 pages worth, of Jodi's personal journal, which was obviously a piece of evidence held by law enforcement, were anonymously mailed to the local newspaper, the Mason City Globe-Gazette.
Yeah, just mailed. In a plain envelope. It wasn't just a minor breach. It was a massive failure in evidence protocol, like you said. That journal should have been securely locked away in an evidence room. The newspaper got it in this large, plain envelope. The postmark was June 4th from Waterloo, Iowa. No return address, nothing.
So completely anonymous. But they figured out who sent it.
They did, and relatively quickly. Within days, the Mason City Police Department identified the sender. And this is where it gets even more concerning. It was Cheryl Ellingson.
Ellingson. Any relation to it?
Yes. The wife of the former Mason City Police Chief, David Ellingson.
The former chief's wife sent copies of evidence to the newspaper. Why?
And that's the crucial missing piece. The source material points out a real lack of transparency here from the MCPD. They never gave an official motive. They didn't explain why the former chief apparently still had a copy of this sensitive evidence after he left office. Nor did they explain why his wife would then choose to anonymously mail it to the press, effectively interfering with an active, albeit cold, investigation.
That just screams internal issues, doesn't it? Potential mishandling of critical evidence at the highest levels. How did that incident, the revelation that the former chief's family had copies of evidence and leaked it, how did that impact the investigation long term? Or public trust?
Oh, it absolutely fuels suspicion, deep suspicion. If evidence like a personal diary, which could hold clues about relationships, fears, maybe even threats, was copied, taken home, and then leaked, well, it makes you wonder, what else might have been improperly handled? What else might be missing or compromised? This kind of internal scandal severely damages public confidence in the investigation. It feeds directly into cover-up theories, whether those theories have any basis in fact or not. The perception of impropriety is incredibly damaging.
And that feeling, that suggestion of internal problems or even a cover-up wasn't just speculation, was it? Didn't someone in politics raise concerns later on?
That's right. It wasn't just whispers. Years later, in December 2016, a retiring state representative named John Kuiker, who had served on the Iowa State House Public Safety Committee, he went public with his concerns. He wrote an opinion piece for a publication called the West Iowa Review, and in it, he specifically suggested there might have been a cover-up by Mason City officials regarding the Huisentruit case.
Wow, a state representative saying that publicly.
Yes. Coming from a high-ranking state official involved in public safety oversight, that adds a whole layer of political controversy on top of an already incredibly fraught investigation.
Okay, so this whole backdrop of suspicion, the journal leak, the political accusations, it makes the focus on specific persons of interest even more critical, doesn't it? And for years, one name just kept surfacing again and again in the public mind: John Van Cease, the guy Jodi visited the night before she disappeared to watch that birthday video.
He was definitely a central figure in the public speculation, and eventually, court documents revealed the investigative focus on him too. In March 2017, a search warrant was executed. It specifically targeted Van Cease, seeking GPS data from two of his vehicles.
GPS tracking. Okay, that's pretty standard investigative stuff these days.
The action itself, yes, but the reasoning behind it, the specific tactic, wasn't fully revealed until much later, actually, in that 2025 Hulu docuseries, her last broadcast.
Ah, okay. What did the docuseries reveal about that warrant? It wasn't just routine data collection.
Not quite. According to the series, it was more like, well, a calculated piece of psychological pressure, almost like trying to provoke a reaction. The docuseries featured the officer who actually requested the warrant, and he apparently admitted the real strategy behind it. He had invited Van Cease in for an interview. The hope was that placing these tracking devices on his vehicles, maybe Van Cease would. The officer hoped that a spooked Van Cease, if he was indeed involved, might panic and maybe drive to a burial site or try to dispose of other evidence he might have kept.
Wow. That's a gamble, a high-stakes move.
Incredibly high stakes. It's basically an admission that, after more than 2 decades, investigators still lack the direct, physical evidence needed to charge him. So they resorted to this behavioral sting operation, hoping to trigger a revealing action. It really speaks to the level of desperation investigators must have felt, with all leads seemingly stalled.
So they tried to force his hand, essentially, or get him to reveal a location through his reaction. But did it work?
No. The sources are clear. No incriminating evidence resulted from the GPS tracking. Van Cease never led them anywhere significant. And importantly, he was never officially named a suspect by police, just remained a person of interest. He was never charged with any crime related to Jodi's disappearance.
And John Van Cease, the man at the center of so much speculation for so long, he actually passed away recently, didn't he?
Yes, he died in December 2024, taking whatever knowledge he might have had with him.
Okay, so the 2025 Hulu docuseries didn't just focus on Van Cease, though. It brought attention to several other individuals, labeling them persons of interest.
That's right. Released in July 2025, the series dramatically broadened the public focus by highlighting 4 distinct individuals as POIs. And it's really crucial we make that distinction the police make. These are persons of interest, not official suspects. The MCPD hasn't found evidence against any of them sufficient to bring charges. But looking at these 4 POIs helps us understand the different angles the investigation has explored over the years.
Who were they?
Okay, the first one mentioned was Tony Jackson. He was identified as a serial rapist who, critically, lived just 2 blocks away from the Kim and T television studios back in 1995.
2 blocks away. A known serial offender. That proximity alone makes him interesting, doesn't it? Especially for a crime that seemed like an ambush in the dark.
Exactly. If the abduction was opportunistic, someone waiting for a woman leaving alone very early in the morning, having a known violent offender living that close, it automatically puts him on the radar. It's a logical person to investigate, even if other circumstances need to align.
Makes sense. Who is the second POI?
The second was a man named Brad Miliband. His connection was more personal. He was the ex-husband of Jodi's childhood best friend.
Ah, okay, so that brings in a completely different potential motive, right? Something related to her social circle, maybe jealousy, or some kind of personal connection rather than a random attack.
Precisely. It opens up that whole avenue of inquiry. And the connection to Miliband actually became relevant again very recently. In mid-October 2024, the Mason City PD conducted a very specific search. They went to a wooded area in rural Winston, Minnesota. This was based on an anonymous tip they received.
Okay, what was the significance of that location?
Well, the Hulu series later revealed that this particular wooded site was right next to a house that Brad Miliband had previously owned.
Wow. So an anonymous tip leads them back to property connected to him decades later.
Yeah, it shows how these old connections and new tips can still drive investigative action, even after so much time has passed.
Okay, so Jackson, local offender. Miller burned, social connection. Who was the third person of interest highlighted in the docuseries?
The third was a man named Christopher Revac. He was described as a suspected serial killer. And the connection. His girlfriend apparently lived in Mason City around the time Jodi disappeared.
A suspected serial killer potentially in the area. That fits the profile of a violent, perhaps transient predator, too.
Absolutely. Revac's profile, often involving violence against women, would certainly make him someone investigators would look at for a sudden, violent abduction like Jodi's. Again, the docuseries presented him only as a POI, but his potential presence in history fit the type of offender who could commit such a crime.
So those three POIs really cover a wide range, don't they? A local serial rapist, someone from her social circle, and a suspected transient serial killer. It shows the police were really considering all sorts of possibilities, from intensely personal motives to completely random predatory violence.
It definitely paints a picture of a wide-ranging, if ultimately inconclusive, investigation.
Meanwhile, outside of the official police work and the docuseries focus, the private investigation efforts have also continued, right? Specifically the work by PI Steve Ridge. He came up with some new details pointing towards motive.
Yes, Severidge started working the case back in 2019, and in 2023, he reported a pretty significant detail about Jodi's personal life right before she vanished. Ridge stated that Jodi had apparently started dating someone new, a brand new boyfriend. According to Ridge, they'd only been dating for about 10 days, but the contact was intense daily or almost daily communication.
10 days? That's very new.
Very new. And Ridge's theory, based on this, was that this sudden, intense new relationship might have triggered significant jealousy in someone else close to her, someone who maybe felt possessive of her time or attention. Ridge suggested this jealousy could have been a direct motive for the abduction.
That's a fascinating angle. A brand new relationship, just 10 days old. It provides a potentially fresh motive that maybe wasn't fully understood or explored back in 1995. And it could potentially narrow the field of suspects, maybe, to people who knew about this new guy and felt threatened or angered by it.
It certainly adds another layer to the crime of passion or jealousy theories. And Ridge's work wasn't just about uncovering potential motives. He also focused heavily on trying to achieve some kind of closure for the family, specifically finding Jodi's remains. He initially put up a substantial reward, $25,000 from private funding, and the terms were specific. It was for information leading directly to the recovery of Jodi's remains. Crucially, he stipulated that an arrest wasn't required for someone to claim the reward.
Just find her. That's the priority.
Exactly. It highlights that the primary goal after all this time is ending the family's agonizing uncertainty. Finding her is paramount.
And he increased that reward, didn't he?
He did. In September 2023, Rich doubled the reward amount to $50,000. That ongoing privately funded incentive shows there's still a persistent belief out there that someone, somewhere holds the key. Someone knows where Jodi is.
So, despite all these more recent developments, the revelations about the GPS tracking the 4 POIs getting public attention from the docuseries, that search in Minnesota, the private reward money, the official status of the case hasn't actually changed, has it?
No. Officially, it remains the same. The sources last confirmed in 2020 that both the Mason City Police Department and the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, DCI, are still actively investigating Jodi Huisentruit's disappearance. The case file remains open. It's still unsolved, still fundamentally trapped in that frustrating gap between suspicion, compelling clues, and actual prosecutable evidence.
When you pull it all together, synthesize all these facts we've walked through, the complexity is just immense, isn't it? We're left with this collection of incredibly specific, incredibly compelling micro details. You know, the screams heard by neighbors, that bent car key, the specific red high heels left behind, the report of the white van, the unidentified palm print, all these concrete little pieces that have just never successfully connected to the bigger picture. They never definitively answered the question, who took Jodi Huisentruit?
And it really raises a fundamental question about any investigation that stretches on for decades like this. What happens when you gather an immense amount of detail? We're talking over 1,000 interviews, multiple national TV shows, specific persons of interest identified, forensic evidence secured at the scene, but that single unifying conclusive link just stays stubbornly out of reach. You see this really sharp, painful contrast playing out. On one hand, you have intense, high-profile media scrutiny and all these private efforts, the TV shows, the psychics, the dedicated websites, the podcasts, the documentary series, all trying to keep the case alive and find answers. And on the other hand, you have the official legal reality, a complete standstill. No suspects ever officially named or charged, no arrests made, just open and cold.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, trying to make sense of it? I think the disappearance of Jodi Huisentruit serves as a really stark case study. It shows the persistence, yes, but also the deep frustrations possible within the American criminal justice system. It means that even cases that seem thoroughly documented, cases with strong public support, cases with vast investigative resources poured into them, even those cases can remain open indefinitely. They can get perpetually trapped in this limbo between definitive proof and persistent, agonizing suspicion.
And maybe one final thought for you to consider, something to mull over as you reflect on the whole long, tangled story of this case. Let's go back to those controversies we discussed, the ones surrounding how evidence was handled. Remember the anonymous leak of Jodi's personal journal in 2008? And the later suggestion by a retiring state representative that there might have been a cover-up. Ask yourself, how might that incident, the unauthorized copying and mailing of critical personal evidence by the former police chief's wife, how might that have fundamentally impacted the public's trust in the Mason City PD and other agencies involved? And could that breach of trust, that shadow of impropriety, have created long-term collateral damage? Could it have affected the official investigation's ability to effectively gather and act upon tips from the public in the years that followed? That's just something to think about on your own.